I'm Reverend Sarah, Interfaith Chaplain for Peace River Canine Search and Rescue, and this is the second of a series of brief webcasts that we're trying on our Facebook page on Sundays, and which might helpfully give you a little food for thought as you head into your week. So today I wanted to speak briefly about self-protection, and not about the physical kind, but about the emotional kind of self-protection. And I'm going to be referencing this very valuable book called Trauma Stewardship by Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. Don't try to remember that name. And she was a social worker. And in the course of her work, she had ongoing intimate contact with people who were either close to or personally suffering from acute trauma. That included child abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse, community tragedies, natural disasters, you name it. So one day, about 10 years in, she was on vacation with her husband, and they were standing on a beautiful cliff overlooking some amazing scenery, and her husband was really enjoying the natural beauty, and she found herself thinking, I wonder how many people have jumped off this cliff, and where would the helicopter land, and etc. So she realized that her work had changed her and that she had lost sight of herself. And in fact, other people's traumas can change us. We can become such advocates for someone else that we lose our own voices, or we are actually feeling their pain in a way that's almost debilitating for us. So we need to find a balance, and it starts with self-protection or self-care. So Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky says that the essence of self-protection is cultivating the skill of being fully present. And I mentioned that last week in our first webcast. So that to me means taking one thing at a time. And that may mean a little something different to you, but to focus fully on one thing at a time is the healthiest way emotionally and psychologically that we can approach anything. Our job is to find a balance, an inner balance. She calls it equanimity, meaning that we arrange, that we work to have enough space for everything. But if we don't start with self-compassion, we're not going to be any good to anyone else. So the first step, which I hope you might try this week, is to slow down and take stock of where you are. And sometimes that's very difficult. It can be scary, but once you've done it, it's very empowering to be able to face what's really going on, and then to start to take action to find that inner balance. Mother Teresa says, and I paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote right now, that without stillness and silence, we cannot help other souls. And I cannot tell you how strongly I believe that. So what I'd like to ask you to try this week is to make some time for stillness. Now you're rolling your eyes and going, oh, she's going to tell us to meditate, but I'm not, because I'm sure you've thought of that before, or maybe you're already doing it, or maybe you have tried it and it didn't work for you, and that's okay. But what I will do is remind you that meditation comes in many, many forms. And again, the point of this is to give yourself, your poor battered body, and your poor overtaxed mind a chance to get quiet, get still, figure out where you are, and then from there start to refuel. And it's going to take some time. It definitely is not going to happen overnight. So, other forms of meditation include things like getting very quiet with your dog, or riding your horse quietly, or talking to your cow. I wish I had a cow. Or knitting or gardening, this you know. it is anything. It could be sailing, anything that takes your mind out of the overly stimulated place where most of us are much of our lives, because most of us are workaholics. And workaholism turns out not to be a good thing, because you get to the point where you can't be alone in a room with yourself. You're so used to being outwardly directed. And the problem with that is there can be nothing left inside, or nothing left, that you need to work on. So again, you can lose yourself, you can lose your voice, you can lose your way, unless you stop and take stock. So we have to maintain self-compassion. If we don't have compassion for ourselves, we cannot have genuine compassion for other people. Or if we have it, it's not going to last. It's going to take its toll. I am guessing that any of you who are caregiving in any way, and that does include most search and rescuers, it could be in your work or it could be in your personal life, no matter how much you do, you feel as if you should have done more. This is a classic sort of a condition with any of us who caregive. We always think it wasn't good enough, and that's not true. That is not true. At any given moment, we're doing the best we can, and it is good enough. We have had that privilege, that sacredness of being called to help, called to serve. And in order to do that, we need to first be kind to ourselves. We can't think, oh, anything that happens, I'm going to turn that off. I'm very sorry that that's happening. I thought I had turned it off. Okay. Those are actually texts from the search and rescue group. So we need to be able to recognize what's happening with ourselves. And it starts with getting quiet. You might have a moment open up in your day, and instead of thinking, oh, I can go grocery shopping, maybe you can use that time to try some of the things that I'm suggesting today. So, in addition to maintaining self-compassion, we have to remember that it's okay if we feel we can't rise above a certain something that has happened during the course of our search and rescue work. We're not saints. We're not superhuman. It's perfectly fine to be affected by something, and it is not a sign of weakness. Absolutely not a sign of weakness. In fact, in a way, it's a sign of strength. Sometimes the only thing we can do is to walk away, not from the work that we're doing, but from negativity. And that's what I call soul destroying. If you have someone who is not supportive, who is negative, who is making you doubt yourself, or worse, intensely dislike or hate yourself, the best thing you can do, if possible, is walk away from that, because that erodes us. That kind of lack of support and unkindness erodes us. None of us need it, and none of us deserve it. It is easier said than done to get away from that sometimes, depending on what our situations are, but that is maybe it's a goal that you're going to hold out here like a carrot for sometime in the not too distant future. So we're trying to find a balance within ourselves, because if we're going to be present for life's suffering, which we as search and rescuers are, we will need all the nourishment and rejuvenation we can get from life's beauty. So let me suggest something you might try this week in order to kind of take a first step, if you're not already, in self-care and the stewardship of your own traumas, your own pain. We all have those things. So there's something called centering prayer, and some of you will be delighted to hear that it's not necessarily religious. It's actually very meditative. So what you do is you pick a word that is very positive for you. It's a word that makes you feel grateful. It could be a word that makes you feel happy, but you don't have to go that far. It could just be a word that makes you feel positive in some way. For me, it might be something like ocean. For some people, it will be Jesus. For others, it would be chocolate, for example. So you take that word, you close your eyes in a quiet spot, however you can get there. It might have to be outdoors and surrounded by the beauty of nature, or if it can't be, somewhere indoors where you can be uninterrupted. And you close your eyes, as I said, and you repeat that word silently over and over and over. And you can be thinking about it initially each time you say it, and then you can kind of get into a trance and not really be thinking about it, but it will help to quiet you. And if closing your eyes doesn't work, staring at a candle flame while you do this is very effective. And I mean a real candle flame, not a faux candle flame. And so this is centering prayer. And I would ask you maybe to try it this week. Try it for 5 minutes. If you're someone who's already able to sit quietly and just focus on your breath, then that's great. For some of us, that's very difficult. There are ways to do that, such as thinking of your breath in colors, and that can help. But try some centering prayer, or think of it as centering meditation this week, and take stock of where you are. You need not to be so hard on yourself. We are very hard on ourselves. You need to take a deep breath and then start to cultivate that skill of finding the balance within yourself. Sometimes that will happen through creativity. Creativity opens up a lot of new avenues, and if you're focused on something creative, could be writing, could be painting, anything, that also helps. But we, as search and rescuers, need to make sure that we understand how to fortify ourselves all along the way. So those of you who are training incredibly hard and coming to the end of a big training cycle, keep this in mind in case you're stressing or in case you're feeling very thinly spread, and get a couple of those minutes to center yourself. And maybe before you get out of your vehicle at training, you can sit quietly and just center yourself any way you can. Create a visualization, picture something lovely, think of somebody who has made a positive difference in your life and focus on that and how you felt or feel when you see or are with that person. Whatever it takes. But do not run home and self-medicate. So I hope that you will have a wonderful week. I'll be thinking of each of you because I know so many of you. You can reach out to me at any time. And I'd also like to say this would make an amazing workshop for us. Incredible if we could have her come, but if we couldn't, certainly I could do a version of this workshop at some point. And so be thinking about if you'd like me to talk more about this next week, or if there's something else you would like me to address, please reach out. You know how to reach me at my email address and or via text, and I will listen to everything that you have to say and will be glad to accommodate you. So have a good week and take deep breaths in through the nose